Bismillah Rahman Rahim and Assalamu alaikum from Dr. Ali Hasnan. Tumors of the middle ear and mastoid can be divided into primary and secondary tumors. The primary tumors can be benign or malignant. The benign tumors include like glomus tumor and malignant tumors like carcinomas and sarcomas of the middle ear cavity. The secondary tumors can come into the middle ear cavity or mastoid from adjacent areas, like from the nasopharynx through eustachian tube, from the external artery canal, and from the parotid gland. The metastatic tumors from the carcinoma of bronchus, breast, kidney, thyroid, prostate, and GI tract can also present in the middle ear cavity. Well, the glomus tumors or paraganglioma or chemodectomas, these are the most common benign neoplasm of middle ear and is so named because of its origin from glomus bodies. The glomus bodies resemble carotid body in structure and are found in the dome of jugular bulb or on the promontory along the course of tympanic branch of ninth cranial nerve, that is Jacobson's nerve. The tumor consists of paraganglionic cells which are derived from the neural crest cells. Considering the etiology and pathology, the tumor is often seen in the middle age, in 40s and 50s. Females are affected 5 times more than males. It is a benign, non-encapsulated but extremely vascular tumor, and its rate of growth is very slow, and several years may pass before there is any change from the initial symptoms. Tumor is locally invasive. Microscopically, it shows masses or sheets of epithelial cells which have large nuclei and granular cytoplasm. There is abundance of thin-walled blood sinusoids with no contractile muscle coat. Because of this, there is profuse bleeding from the tumor. There are two types of glomus tumor. The glomus jugulare, they arise from the dome of the jugular bulb. They invade the hypotympanon and jugular foramen, causing the neurological signs of ninth to 12th cranial nerve involvement. They may compress jugular vein or invade its lumen. The glomus tympanicum, they are uncommon. They arise from the promontory of the middle ear and cause oral symptoms, sometimes with facial paralysis. Sometimes a patient may present with combination of these tumors. In that case, that patient is said to have glomus jugulotympanicum tumor. Well, this tumor may initially fill the middle ear and later perforate through the tympanic membrane to present as vascular polyp. It may invade labyrinth, it may invade jugular foramen, or may spread through eustachian tube and present in the nasopharynx. It may spread intracranially to the posterior and middle cranial fossa, and metastatic spread to the lungs and bone is rare, but it is seen in 4% of cases. Metastatic lymph node enlargement can also occur. In 90% of cases, symptoms pertain to the ear. When tumor is intratympanic, the earliest symptoms are deafness and tinnitus. Deafness is conductive and slowly progressive. Tinnitus is pulsatile and of swishing character, synchronous with pulse, and can be temporarily stopped by carotid pressure. Otoscopy shows red reflex through intact tympanic membrane. Rising sun appearance is seen when tumor arises from the floor of the middle ear. Sometimes tympanic membrane appears bluish and may be bulging. Pulsation sign or brown sign is positive, which means when ear canal pressure is raised with Siegel's speculum, tumor pulsates vigorously and then blanches. Reverse happens with the release of the pressure. When the tumor presents as a polyp, in addition to deafness and tinnitus, there is history of profuse bleeding from the ear, either spontaneously or an attempt to clean it. Dizziness or vertigo and facial paralysis may appear. Earache is less common than in carcinoma of the external and middle ear, and this helps to differentiate it from the carcinoma. Otorrhea or ear discharge may occur due to secondary infections, and the condition may simulate chronic suprarenal media with polyp. Examination reveals a red vascular polyp filling the meatus It bleeds readily and profusely on manipulation or at biopsy. Cranial palsies is a late feature, appearing several years after oral symptoms. Ninth to 12th cranial nerve may be paralyzed. There is dysphagia and hoarseness with unilateral paralysis of soft palate, pharynx, and vocal cords with weakness of the trapezius and sternocleidomastoid muscle. Tumor may present as a mass over the mastoid or in the nasopharynx. The signs of intracranial involvement may also occur. An audible bruit at all stages is present. Auscultation with stethoscope over the mastoid may reveal systolic bruit. Some glomus tumors secrete catecholamines and produce symptoms like headache, sweating, palpitation, hypertension, and anxiety and require further investigations. There is this rules of 10 associated with glomus tumor. 10% of the tumors are familial, 10% are multicentric, and up to 10% are functional. That is, they secrete catecholamines. The differential diagnosis of the glomer tumor include dehiscent or high jugular bulb, aberrant internal carotid artery, true aneurysm of internal carotid artery. These can be differentiated. Basically, these all conditions present as rising sun sign, and these can be differentiated on CT scan. The differential diagnosis of pulsatile tinnitus includes benign intracranial hypertension, tortuous artery of sigmoid, tortuous anatomy of sigmoid sinus, dural AV malformations, and glomus vagale. If you want to diagnose it, in addition to thorough history and physical examination, the patient is checked up to find out the extent of the tumor, other associated glomer tumors, and serum levels of catecholamines or their breakdown products in urine. The investigations include CT scan head using bone window 1 mm thin sections are cut. Both axial and coronal slices are taken. If on an axial slice the jugular fossa appears enlarged, you should look for eroded cortex. If there is erosion of cortex, then this means that this patient has glomus jugulare. But if the cortex is normal, that is the cortex of jugular fossa is normal, then this patient has high jugular bulb. If on an axial CT scan the jugular fossa is normal, then you should look at the coronal sections. The coronal section shows normal carotid canal, then this means that this patient has glomus tympanicum. And if the carotid canal is laterally displaced, then this means that this patient has aberrant internal carotid artery. MRI gives soft tissue extent of the tumor. Magnetic resonance angiography and venography further helps to delineate invasion of jugular bulb and compression of the internal carotid artery. Sometimes CT and MRI are done in combination. 4-vessel angiography can be done. It is useful to find out extent of the tumor and the compression of the internal carotid artery. It is useful in finding other carotid body tumors, embolization of the tumor if that becomes necessary. If the case needs surgical treatment, brain perfusion studies and adequacy of contralateral internal carotid artery and circle of Willis is also assessed. Diagnosis of glomus tumor is made on clinical and radiographic findings. Diagnostic biopsy is not done as the tumor is highly vascular. Embolization of the tumor is done if the tumor is large and you are planning to surgically resect the tumor. The embolization of the feeding vessel, that is the ascending pharyngeal artery, is done 1 to 2 days before operation. This helps to reduce blood loss. The treatment consists of surgical removal of the tumor, radiation, embolization, or combination of these. For surgery, a transcanal approach can be done. This is suitable for limited glomus tympanicum tumor. Hypertonic approach is used for tumors limited to promontory. Extended facial recess approach is used for glomus tympanicum extending into the mastoid but not into the jugular bulb. Mastoid neck approach is used for glomus jugular tumor not extending to the internal carotid artery, posterior coronal fossa, or neck. The infratemporal fossa approach of Fish is used for large glomus jugular tumor. Transcondylar approach is used for tumors extending towards the foramen magnum, and radiation is the treatment that does not cure the tumor but may reduce its vascularity and arrest its growth. And embolization, I've already mentioned, if someone is planning to resect a large glomus tumor, then embolization can be done 1 to 2 days before to reduce the vascularity of the tumor so that per-operative bleeding is reduced. Thank you very much. If you have any question, you can ask us in WhatsApp group. Thank you and Allah Hafiz.